A group of amateur and professional intellectuals called the Neoconservatives, or neocons, altered the landscape of American imperialism studies after 9/11 and the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center in New York. Searching for an explanation of the Bush policy on the Middle East, Robert Merry went back as far as the 13th century in Europe to trace the concept of progress as one of the most powerful and perhaps delusional ideas of Western civilization. It was the neoconservatives who found ready allies among top Bush nationalist officials in promoting their own idea of progress as a missionary American creed. The neocons persuaded Bush II that American hegemony would assure American homeland security, but what they engineered was a war of civilization against an Islam hostile to the West. Neocons assumed the world would accept United States military domination because it had no choice and would trust the United States government because American values are pure. Some people reject this utopian plan as failing to account for the erosion of foreign trust in the United States, leading to an empire by coercion and not consent, as evidenced by the invasion of Iraq in 2003 by Bush II. This is an empire of accumulation by dispossession, of which the oil of Iraq is just one example. A transnational class of renters, financiers, and corporate CEOs look to the United States hegemon to protect their class interests and build up institutions within which they could gather the wealth of the world through predatory capitalism. The anti-war position in 2003, following the invasion of Iraq, had a legal basis but not much prospect for success, despite efforts by Francis Boyle, a law professor at the University of Illinois. For Boyle, 9/11 did not alter the course of American empire, initiated in 1789 with the ethnic cleansing of natives. In 2003, U.S. imperialism was concerned with theft of Muslim-owned hydrocarbons and support for Israel. Bush II decided to go outside of international law and launch unlawful preventive war, which was a defense proposed at first by Nazi defendants in the Nuremberg trials after World War II. Boyle's premise was that the United States must act according to international law, not the realism of Bush II neocons, who took their political philosophy from Leo Strauss and Machiavelli. Boyle presented his own articles of impeachment for Bush II, also against Dick Cheney, the vice president, alleging that they had violated their oath of office by conspiring to suspend habeas corpus, conducted unlawful searches and seizures, undermined judicial independence, bribed UN officials, conspired to make aggressive war on Iraq, failed to secure a declaration of war from Congress, setting aside the Fourth Geneva Convention of 1949 against belligerent occupiers changing the domestic legal order of a state, and U.S. military prohibitions against crimes of war, crimes against peace, and conspiracy, incitement, and complicity in same perpetrated by Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, Powell, and Rice. Bush II also set aside the 1932 Stimson Doctrine that no nation may enjoy the fruits of aggression. The frightening thesis of Chalmers Johnson is that America has created an empire of military bases rather than colonies, creating, in the process, a government that is obsessed with maintaining absolute military dominion over the entire planet. Not only did the U.S. have 725 official military bases in foreign countries and almost 1,000 within the United States, a secret government had been ensconced at the Pentagon, which only a revolution could evict. 3 policy goals directed this new security empire. 1. More oil supply. 2. Defense contracts. 3. 100% support for the government of Israel. The United States had been subsidizing private American oil companies for decades by virtue of its military protection system for oil facilities and pipelines worldwide. The U.S. government would not voluntarily retreat from the empire business because it provides too much employment for oil companies, the defense industry, the Pentagon, multinational corporations, banks, hedge funds, and advocates for globalization. The idea that the United States has always been an empire is not exactly new. George Lichtheim indicated as much as in 1971. However, after 2003 and Bush II's War of Choice, Niall Ferguson was the most popular advocate based on his conviction that the progress of humankind requires imperial direction. Just as the British Empire brought free markets, rule of law, English, banking, Protestantism, and investor protection to the colonized, the United States government had to take up the white man's burden and police the world for free trade. Sadly for Ferguson, the U.S. empire was in denial. It had been shirking its responsibility by denying that it was an empire. A liberal economy needed an imperial enforcer. It was pointless to hide behind euphemism like hegemon to describe the American liberal empire, which ruled informally via multinational corporations, bestowing its benefits on Republican oilmen and CEOs. Like the old British Empire, the U.S. Empire publicly voiced altruism, promoting civilization, while launching pre-emptive wars and occupying countries for decades. This was hypocrisy, of course, but necessary. Ferguson was famous for saying, "I am fundamentally in favor of empire." His approach to empire recalls to mind the Tory Imperialism of Margaret Thatcher, the shopkeeper imperialism of anxiety about securing reliable supplies for staying in business and paying the rent. It was responsibility to the family concern, mixed with psychotic indifference to foreign people who would bear the burdens of empire. This is your empire historian, Frank H. Wallis, Ph.D. Thank you for listening and thinking.